Farad.
So I suggest someone else also please record the meeting. Maybe Kiranji, you can record. I'm recording.
Okay.
All right. Okay, fine.
Should I record on the cloud or to the computer?
No, to the computer,
Okay.
All right, so maybe we can then get started. So Vijit, if you can please share
Yes.
your screen. Otherwise,
Yeah. So I hope we chat. Okay, fine. So chat, share screen. I cannot share my screen. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
okay. Yeah. Now, can you now try?
Okay, let me try. Yes, I can. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Will,
you may want to make it full screen. Yeah, and start. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make a full screen. I'll give a very brief, what to say, a brief recapitulation of the last thing. So the last time we saw, this was the start of the 7th century AD. This is the map, wherein still the 7th century, where the Arab Umayyad Caliphate had been, so 7th century AD end. So this was the original 7th century AD start of the map, and this was the Indian country. And these are the countries, like these were the three principalities of Bamiyan. This is Zabul, this is Kabul or Kapisa, Jabal, and Bamiyan. And then these were the Khorasan and Turkestan and all. And how the attempts were made from 636 onwards to 711 just to capture Sindh. And this was still the end of the 7th century AD, which before the capture of Sindh. This was the scenario of the Zabul kingdom, and this is the Helmand river, which always formed the boundary of Bharat. We will discuss today. And this was the aftermath of the fall of the Sindh. There were several battles that the Indian kings fought from Jayabhatta IV in 736 AD, exactly 100 years after the first attack, and how he crushed the Tajik army or the Arab army. And the next was the Chalukya viceroy, Avanija Asraya, Pulakeshin, who was actually the brother of the Chalukya king. And he defeated them at Navasari in Gujarat in 737. Bappa Rawal, the Rajput ruler, with support of Chalukyas in Gujarat and the Pratiharas of the western and central India, he defeated the 738 AD, and Nagabhatta I repulsed them at Ujjain. 756 AD and 776 AD, and again in 776 AD, Agukka I of Saindhava dynasty, very small principality in Gujarat, crushed them in the seas in a naval war, which forced the caliphate to take note that they will never send any naval expeditions to India. And even the land expansion in Punjab and Kashmir was stopped by Lalitaditya Muktipada with the help of Jashovarman of central India. And just to give there were two Kalats. This is the Balochistan Kalat and Makaran. These were the original attack places, which are the western part of the. And this is the start of the 9th century AD. That means 800 AD. So if we see here, we still see that the boundary of India, current India, if you see, it is still around. The Gujjara Pratihara kingdom is still there. It's very close. It's not too far from the eastern banks of the river Indus. We have not lost anything except for maybe, and if you see that this is the Chittagong district of the Arakan Empire, which again was not considered part of the Indian Empire, but only the Dandavukti from Pala Empire has gone to the Bangladesh. So basically, we have been holding everything, even the Kashmir, areas of Kashmir, Nepal, and everything that has happened is still with us. So today we will discuss more about the Zabul and Shahi. And if you see, at the start of the 800th century AD, the great Umayyad Caliphate, which was the main the Caliphate Arab expansion of post-Muhammad Islamic expansion empire has now been limited only to Spain. It has been sent to Spain, and there is the Abbasid Caliphate that exists, and the Islamic so-called Arab Caliphate now exists from Spain to the borders of India at 900 century AD, when their expansion started in 636. So we see that even after 150, 160 years of continuous warfare, they have opened up. I mean, they have completely defeated one of the most powerful kingdoms, the Sassanid Persian Empire. They have eaten into the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. They've eaten into the Germanic part of the Western Roman Empire and the North African Arabs everywhere, but they have been stopped at the gates of India. So, and if you compare this map with today, which we will discuss at the end, we know how many countries today exist in this empire and what is their state. So we will come to this later on. And the unfortunate part, even today, we will see that I have taken several information, date-wise information, which match with the book by Sitaram Goelji, what is being taught in Pakistan. I mean, in the history of Pakistan, they are mentioning the failure of Arabs in this land. Unfortunately, Indian history does not teach us this. Very unfortunate part. And given this empire, I want to also share one more thing, just to remind this. If you can see this, or else I will just make it even bigger. That this was the time frame, 636 AD when they started. And one more thing is their caliphate started in 632 AD, 632, 634 AD. And the Umayyad Caliphate ended in 750 AD. So the first four caliphs were the Rashidun. The fifth was also a Rashidun, but they call him just Ali because he just, was there for 10 months before he was deposed by Muwayya, the first Umayyad Caliphate, after a battle and a negotiation that happened within themselves. But this is exactly what the Caliphate was. So this is just a recapitulation of what we discussed the last session. We'll move into today's session. Now, I've taken that northwestern part, enlarged the northwestern part of map and modern Afghanistan. Just to give you why I have put this map is to give a background of understanding of the physical topography or topology of the land and the current the land. And this line is the rough, it's a linear line. Obviously no border can be linear, but this is a roughly the boundary of Bharatvarsha. So the western part of the Helmand River was never considered to be Bharatvarsha. This was the Balkh or Balkadesh that we hear in Mahabharata. And then there is the Siestan, Turkostan, Balkistan or Balkh, and all those places, which were actually the part of the eastern provinces of the Persian Empire. So basically the Hindu Kush and the Paramesus Mountains. The Paramesus Mountains is the Greek name, and the Pamir Range here, which then it's the Himalayas. So this was considered as the boundary of Bharatvarsha, the northwestern Bharatvarsha. And just a small anecdote, this is here, this Uzbekistan, Tajikistan here, this is exactly the province of Farghana, the home province of Babur. So he didn't have to travel much, and he was actually a border guy who just crossed this Khyber. And this is the Khyber Pakhtunwala Pass, which has been so voraciously defended through thousands of years by the Indians. And frankly, we lost this by negotiation, never by war. So this belt was considered to be the Gandharva region and the Kamboj. This is the Kamboj and the Gandharva region of Bharatvarsha. This is the Registan, is nothing but the desert. This is the desert place with the Helmand River, which dried up. and obviously they had to move up. I mean, come eastwards. The initial people who used to live over here. And exactly here we have the three kingdoms. This was the bulk of the Siestan. Siestan. This was the actually Siestan and bulk over the, and this is the southern part is the Zabul kingdom along the Helmand River. The Shahi has a lot of discussions that whether the Shahi was a Turko. Al-Baruni mentions it that a Turko Shahi. It has nothing to do with Turks, but is the Turkoshan, which is nothing but this region. And then which was converted into the Buddhist during the reign of Kanishka, and later it was again captured by the Kamboja Kshatriyas. So this is the Hindu Shahi, which existed in the 9th century. So initially it was the Turko Shahi and the Hindu Shahi. So basically the Shahi kingdoms is the Shao, the original Shao thing, this one, and kingdom that we will going to discuss. And the Shahi kingdom included the kingdom of Kapisa and Kabul. Now, as we know, as we discussed the last time, with the rise of caliphate in Arab and their expansion, I mean the expansion by religious zeal to spread Islam, they attacked the Eastern Empire of Sassanid Empire of Persia, and in the West they attacked the Byzantine Empire of the Romans, Eastern Romans, and the Europeans, and obviously the Arabs. Now, from 636, they started attacking the Indian shores, mostly through naval expeditions. And then they started in 50 AD. They started attacking the Siestan, which was the easternmost province of Persia, which fell, or Shakistan, the Sassanid Empire, by the general Abar Rabi bin Ziyad. This was the 650 first expedition. After the success in Siestan, which also had some of the Hindu population, as happens in the border areas, in around 652 and 653, they attacked Jabal, the kingdom of Zabul. And initially, the attack was partially successful. The Arab general Abdul Rahman conquered Jabal, and the Shahi kingdom agreed to pay a levy to the caliphate to prevent war. And it was 653 was 652, 653, they were partially successful. But as they turned their backs, they could not establish their hold on these lands. As they turned their backs, the revolt started. There is a mention of King Ranbal. Now there are two King Ranbals. Ranbal, or he's also been named as Ratibal. The name has been mentioned in Persian texts. I mean, when I say Persian text, it's not the Islamic Persian text, but the pre-Islamic Persian text. He has been mentioned by the Arabic text. He has been mentioned also in our Hindu text. Ratibal, Ranbal, the same person. He revolted, even in going as far as in the Siestan itself, and killed Yazid bin Ziyad, who was bin Abihi, who was the governor of Siestan. And the battle was so fierce that the Arabs were completely defeated, and he went up to boast. This is what is being told even by the Islamic historians, that he captured up to Bost. Now, where is Bost? I'll go back. Bost is exactly sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's not working. Okay. Okay. Let me make this bigger.
Maybe you can close the PPTX and open it again.
Yeah, let me, can I just, I'll just stop sharing once and then I'll come back.
Yes, sure. Oh, Vijit, you may close the PPTX.
Yeah. I'm just closing.
Yeah, the PowerPoint sometimes
Yes.
doesn't work.
Just a second. So sorry for this. So as we were discussing, so still Bost is nothing but around here. The mouth, I mean, this around the west. Yeah.
Vijit,
Oh,
your
sorry.
screen-
Oh, it's not. I have to reshare, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Good. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So Bost is as we said, he defeated them up to Bost. Bost is nothing but exactly around this start of the Helmand River, so extreme most thing. So this is what this has been told, and they had to, now the Arabs who collected levied a war indemnity the last time, now had to pay 5 lakh dirhams just to save themselves. So this is a 683. Now when Ranbal I died after Ranbal I died in the battle, his son took up the title again, Ranbal or Rotibal, and continued the war. And in 692, when there was one more, Arab General Abdullah invaded Kabul. Basically, what he allowed was, he allowed them to come into the Kabul Valley. If you go back to the previous scene, exactly, he allowed them to come inside the Kabul Valley, and you see, and he trapped them inside the mountains so that they can neither go back nor come forward. I mean, this was definitely one of the best ploys of the Rajputana, which were later followed by Raj Singh against the Mughal army of Aurangzeb. So he trapped them, and then peace was established. Now there was again some money exchange. Some 300,000 was paid by the Ranbal, the second. We are considering him the second as after his father, and peace was established. But again, this was not accepted. Now, as the caliphate became very upset with this peace, so they sent Arab general in 695 to 695. They sent Arab general Ubaidullah, now which is sons, and got captured. Now Ubaidullah in the battle was so thoroughly defeated that all his 3 sons were captured and hostages taken hostages by the Hindu army. So Ubaidullah wanted to surrender, but his lieutenant or captain Suraya continued to fight, didn't surrender, and he was killed. So basically, the Arab army was decimated in 695. Now, look, having seen this, the Caliphate now sent Abdullah again. But this time again, they trapped him, and Abdullah again agreed for peace and came back. Hearing this, the Caliph told that Abdullah will be now superseded, which was very insulting to him, and he committed suicide. Now, Al-Hajjaj, if you remember it from the last session, was the governor of Iraq and a very ambitious general, had to basically make peace so that, and he was paid a small indemnity once in a while on the border areas, in exchange that he will not harass the border forts, the border citadels. That's all they could do around 700, by 700 AD. Now, after 700 AD, Caliph Suleiman, 715 to 717 AD, did not receive any taxes. The Hindus stopped paying the taxes, and there were no taxes sent. So as the taxes were stopped, he again attacked these kingdoms, and was absolutely with very minimal success of some border citadels. There was no success. It was again repeated 30 years after this, and by 745, between 745 to 775, Caliph Al-Mansur also tried the same thing to subjugate the Hindu kingdoms with very limited success around the borders. And as we see that from the chronicles in 915, it is the Hindu kingdoms which existed in Kabul and Zabul. The only thing was, in the meantime, which I will discuss again, there was a change in the lineage. The original Turko Shahis were now replaced by the Buddhist Shahis were now replaced by the completely Hindu Shahis. Although they were Buddhists, they were like Buddhists with the Kshatriya lineage and mostly with the Hindu army. Now it was the Hindu kingdom of the Kallar. Now it was the Jaipalas and others who came into power. Till 1816, the Hindus continued to rule Kabul and Zabul. In 870, Kabul was temporarily lost by deceit. Here also, what happened was there was a Turkish bandit, basically a bandit dacoit, who came and wanted shelter. And this is one mistake which has been done by the Hindus all along. They always trust. They have always trusted. That's what we have said, right? Whenever someone who is in a pity state, who is asking for mercy, who is asking for shelter, must be sheltered, given shelter and everything, right? That is what our Hindu principles of life say. Our Swabhava says. But that is only true if the other person is also following the same Swabhava. If he is a deceit, he is a scoundrel, you should not follow that principle. And that was in fact first understood by Shivaji Maharaj. Other than that, a deceit should be, countered with counter deceit. So you cannot, if a night war is called, you will have to call Ghatotkacha, right? If they are doing nonsense, you will have to temporarily hide the sun to bring Jayadratha out. So we'll have to do. If they are playing the deceit game, you will have to play the deceit game too, because ultimately the greater truth is what we are looking for. So, but we have always felt that. And in following the temporary fall of Kabul, the capital was moved to Udbandapur. Udbandapur is nothing but Und, modern day Und or Waipur, which is further east towards Indus. The capital was moved. Now, the Hindu Sahis continued to rule till 963 AD, although there were several attacks in between by the Alaptigin and Sabuktagin and Alpatigin, the Turkish Islamic rulers in 933 and 963. The Kabul was permanently lost in 963 to Sabuktagin. But by that time, the capital had been shifted eastwards. In 978 AD, King Jaipal of the Shahi kingdoms called upon the kings of Delhi, Ajmer, Kalinjar and Kanauj and led the attack directly into the heart of the Ghaznavid Empire or the Turko-Afghan Empire, to Ghazni, directly in the heart of Ghazni. And a pitched battle was fought when, yes, both the armies got depleted, it was only by a inclement weather that Jaipal sent a peace proposal, which was accepted by the Ghaznavids initially, by Sabuktigin, and they made a peace. Again, a peace treaty was found, but again, that was very temporary. In 1001 AD, actually, the Mahmud of Ghazni finally attacked Udbandapur and could capture that in that battle. That was the first battle where we lost the Zabul and the Kabul kingdoms permanently. Now, so basically 1000 AD is when so there is basically 350 years, there was heroic resistance to a monolithic Arabic army continuously by the smaller principalities or border principalities of India, of Northwest, and that with heavy losses. And how the level of the losses, why I have quoted these anecdotes from the history of Pakistan is because this is an Islamic history which has never agreed upon the Hinduic heroism, but it is from their writings that I am picking up. In the wake of the Muslim invasions of Kabul in the second half of the 7th century, the Kabul ruler appealed to the Khattriyas of Hind, who had gathered in large numbers of assistance, and drove out the Muslim invaders as far as Bost. Historypark.com, Hindu Shahi dynasty. So this is exactly what is history in Pakistan talks about that northwestern belt, northwestern Afghanistan belt. Kallar, 843 to 50, the founder of the Hindu Shahi dynasty, is known only from Abu Rihan al-Biruni's list. So al-Biruni, who was absolutely a biased Arabic historian, mentions about the Hindu Shahi dynasty's presence in the 9th century AD, in the middle of the 9th century, in his own travelogues. And if you go by al-Biruni's travelogues, which have been translated, he mentions about the expansion of Islam, fall of Afghan belt and everything only to Shiastan, Balkh, Turkosan and Khorasan, which is exactly on the western side of the Helmand River and western side of the Hindu Kush mountains. So what he's saying, the precise circumstances which led to his rise are still a mystery. He was a mystery of Kabul Shah, Persian historians called Turk Shahi, who found wealth and dethroned his unpopular king, Lagutar bin Turk Shahi, which is nothing but the Turko Shahi, but is not actually a Turk. Here the Turk is not about Turk, but the Turko Shahi, which is just west of the Zabul kingdoms, who had suffered at the hands of the Persians. And the history of these Shahi dynasties have been recorded by one Dr. Abdur Rahman in Pakistan. So they accept about the resistance and battles and wars that we have fought for 350 years against a monolithic army, which were able to decimate the two most powerful empires of the day, the Byzantine and the Sassanid Persian Empire. From the old Arabic historians makes mention of a prince in the valley of the Indus who, after having subjugated eastern Persia, advanced to the bank of the Tigris and Euphrates. So our principalities, we could drive them up to Iraq. Iraq is where the Tigris and Euphrates is all about. So we could drive them to the border of Iraq, drove the Arab army back to them. So that was our heroic resistance and aggression of the Hindus of those times. In fact, it has been mentioned that the way Jaipal led the Rajput army and into Ghaznavi, if that could have continued, that bravery could have been continued by the later Rajput rulers, we would have been even more powerful. Even according to Al-Baladhuri, Arabic historian again, Al-Hajjaj made peace treaty with Ranbal. Ranbal is the king that we have talked about. He further tells that the king of Kabul or Zabul did pay some dirhams every year, but these tributes were temporary, and Siestan was never subjugated completely. So not even Siestan was completely subjugated. Forget about Zabul and Kabul. . Now I will come back to here. I will come back to here. I will come back to this part later on, maybe. So basically, this was the 9th century AD part, and after years of 350 years with not the caliphate but the Seljuk Turks and the Turks, is when they could capture only a part of the Shahi kingdom. So the Shahi kingdom, they could not reach Punjab and all. So basically, they could only take up this border principalities, and they remained at there. This is exactly was the map that has continued even today. So they could capture from Spain to Persia, but not India. So at the start of this, the Umayyad Caliphate ceased to exist. Abbasid now extended from Spain to the borders of India. As we see, the Bharatvarsha remained almost the same, and after centuries with minor changes, it is as it is even now. So the Gujjar Pratihara kingdom of then is almost the lines of modern Rajasthan and Gujarat. There can be minor changes, a few kilometers here and there, but if you see, it is roughly the same border that we see of India, Rajasthan and Gujarat. And as I was saying, the Saindhavas, small principalities have taken on the mighty Arab empire and the Arab army and decimated them, completely decimated. So much so that they never ever thought about attacking India again. The Arabs never attacked again. Now, what is the aftermath of both these heroic resistance? This is a very key part. Post fall of Raja Dahi that we discussed the last time of the Chacha kingdom, the Arabs could capture only a few towns of South Gujarat and Brahmanbad, but further forays were completely stopped, and even most of these gains were reversed. Similarly, the Arabs utterly failed in Kabul and Zabul. It was the later Turks who could capture, the Turko-Afghans who could capture areas, but Arabs completely failed. Partially succeeded, and that too, the Shahi kingdom was not completely wiped off, even in the start of the 11th century. But even smaller principalities decimated Arab armies and chased till Tigris and Euphrates. Naval defeat by the Saindhavas of the Gujarat coast prevented Arabs from launching any naval attack on India. So powerful was our naval kingdom. The Arab travelers to India of the 10th century all speak of two independent Arab principalities only, the Multan and Mansura as the capital in the western part. The Pratihara kingdoms waged constant war against the Arab prince of Multan and with the Muslims as subjects of the frontier. And Multan would have been lost but for a Hindu temple. So as we discussed the other day, they used to hide behind the Sun temple, excuse me, of Multan, which was used as a cover for the Arab soldiers to protect them from the Hindu attack. It has to be kept in mind that all along that the Arab empire in this period was the mightiest power on the earth. No doubt about that. They had completely defeated two biggest empires of the time, including the Byzantine, the Eastern Roman Empire, which was a Christian kingdom, and the Persian kingdom or the Sassanid Empire, along with all others from the Mediterranean to the borders of Bharatvarsha or Hind as they called. Compared to this monolithic and highly militarized giant, the Hindu principalities of Sindh and other border areas were no better than pygmies. Yet the pygmies, as Sitaram Goelji points out, yet the pygmies had the last laugh at the end of the 10th century when the Islamized Turks took over the Arabs. Islamic crusade against Sindh and Hind started again. So it has been always, Gajwahi Hind has been there from 636 AD, and it has been years that have gone, but this again start from Sindh and Hind. That's all is the old story. It was the same old story of Alexander and the small republics of the Punjab and Sindh all over again. So, and what we must always remember, as I discussed and shared over a small blog today in the morning, in the group, is that we always have heard about the Russian Empire being the graveyard of invading armies. Be the Grand Army of Napoleon, which was never defeated before 1812, or the army of, the Nazi army of the Third Reich, which was like a marauding army which had taken over entire Europe, North Africa, everything, and made the retreat from Russia is the worst thing. But if you see between 1812 and 1930, it was only a couple of hundred of years when these things were happened. For India, it has happened for thousands of years that Punjab, Sindh, and those border areas and the foreign marauding armies have been stopped there, and their retreating has been so harassing that they've been decimated to a few soldiers before they could run away. And that has been the story for thousands of years, even before Alexander's. The Persian Empire have suffered. The Macedonian Empire has suffered. The Greek, the Seleucid Empire of the Greeks of Seleucus have suffered. Everyone, no one has been successful, and the retreat has been even more painful to the deserts of Balochistan and the Registan of Registan around the Helmand River. It has been pathetic for them, unless they could somehow escape from the sea. So the resistance by the Indians have always been heroic. And the start of the 9th century, as we just discussed, had an Arabic empire from Spain to the borders of Bharatvarsha, which has now, if you see, now if I go back to that empire, Spain have been lost. From Morocco to the small countries of northern Africa, Saudi Arabia, this is Egypt, then they have the Israel, the Syria, the Turkey, the modern Turkey, Albania, and smaller principalities and countries, Iraq. So everything, this has been broken into several small countries. And if you see the southern coast of Saudi Arabia, it is Yemen and others and all. So they have been, which are at constant war, and the condition of the people are well known to everyone. But if you see, the great country of Bharatvarsha remains together, unified by our, as Kiranji said the other day, it remains united by our Swabhava and Swadharma. We remain united just by that. And everything is based on those principles. Yes, we fought wars among ourselves, but it was all based on our noble principles that we followed. The knights were, the knights and the chivalry of the knights is way later, and just an eyewash in front of the Swabhava and Swacharitra and the Swadharma that we followed in war, which we have followed over thousands of years. We remain strong as a country. We remain strong as 1.2 billion Hindus. Yes, there are 1.6 billion Shias and 1.8 billion Muslims spread over the world, fighting amongst them, decimating each other only to capture their tribal lust for power and blood. But we stand strong together. And after this, I would just take you to this thing. This has been a very interesting thing which I wanted to mention. The actual Nuristan spread over a belt of Afghanistan. I will show it in the map. Around this Hindu Kush belt, here, this is one of the 39 provinces of Afghanistan is called today Nuristan, or as they used to mention, Kafiristan. There remained Hindus till 1895-96 and formed the buffer zone between the British and the Afghan Empire. British India and the Afghan Empire. It was only in 1895 that they were converted. And one of the Nuri groups still exists in Pakistan as Chitral, in the Chitral district of Pakistan, bordering Nuristan of Afghanistan. And these people, they are the Kalash people. And they follow the Kalashala language, which is like a pre-Vedic Sanskrit. And they follow the pre-Vedic Hinduism with early animism, as Mahandev, Imra, and Indra as their deities, which they worship. It's an absolute worship that they follow. And they continue to follow that even today. And they're ferociously independent. And if you see tortures of minorities and abductions in Pakistan, if you go through the news, the maximum ferocity has been around this Chitral district of Pakistan, because they follow that early Hinduism. Even today, and they are ferociously independent. They could not be, they could not be subdued. Just think of a district being switched between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Apologists sometimes talk about all those, oh, the what is it? Broad-mindedness of this Islam and all. Absolutely, absolutely nonsense. They are being harassed. Their women are being abducted, and yet they fight their way for their culture, and they have been successful till date. Now, there is also a section in this chapter about perceived Arab liberalism by the so-called apologists. It has been observed that in India, after the post-Arab, even when the Arabs established themselves, they could not win over or convert the people easily in India. It was an absolute failure. They could not, yes, they enslaved people, some people they enslaved, they broke down 1 or 2 temples here and there, but Arabs could not, early Arabs could not convert. Now that has been taken up as the broad-mindedness or the tolerance of early Arabs by the apologists, but Dr. Misra never makes that mistake. He says, as according to the Islamic law, there are 2 groups. Once they capture the so-called kafirs or the infidels, there are two groups: possessors of scriptures, that is the Jews and Christians. The main reason being is Jesus is also considered a Nabi in the lineage of the Islamic history, but the last and the greatest Nabi is Muhammad. So that is what the Islamists follow. Same, even Moses is considered one of the forefathers or the Nabis, but are at a lesser content. So not to be lawfully molested in any way, so long as they accepted the rule of the conquerors and paid the jizya. So if I pay the tax and I accept your suzerainty, the Arab suzerainty, they will allow them to leave. But the idolaters, or like what the Hindus were, or the old Greek pagans were. If you see, the old Greek paganism has been decimated, has been wiped off. The old Roman or Italian idol worship has been wiped off. And they were very powerful of those eras, but they have been wiped off. But the choice was between Islam and death. So you accept my religion or you accept death. 2 reasons. And the death will be a very cruel death. So not a simple death. So it will be a cruel death. So that you get, they can instill the fear among the population, local population. And yet the conversion in India was not high. We still stand at 1.2 billion. So only place that they tried was Debal. So but military and the political and the military, not he, the military and the political leaders always knew when and where to make a compromise. See, always the Arabs, when they were in trouble with Ranbal or the subsequent leaders, they always, what they did, they tried for a compromise, because they knew that they are in trouble. So they always tried for a compromise, for temporary peace. The moment they get back strength, they will attack again. So they always knew when to make a compromise, that is when they are in danger or in the interest of self-preservation, until the next stage of aggrandizement arrived and the vicissitudes of war. So that means when I get the next opportunity, I fight the next war. But till that, I will lie low and make the concession, so that I do not get decimated today. Complete decimation doesn't happen today. And the Hindus have, because of their nature, have made this mistake again and again. So they have let go these people and allowed them to come back again and again. So we have never lost a war, in a military war as such. Whenever it has been attacked, we have defended every inch of our land. We have chased, our small principalities have chased them away from our lands to Iraq, up to Iraq. So that is not something that we are even worried about. For Sindh, they are forced to compromise in face of constant opposition. In the Northwest, they did not even have the opportunity or time to convert for the Arabs. So with that, I have given all the references of the last, the last one, and as well as in this one, all the places, including the in the Pakistan history sources, which mentions about the Shahi dynasties and the Shahi things. This is definitely a knowledge sharing session. If we have to publish this data as a book or something, we will have to be we will have to draw our own graphics and own graphic designs and everything, and we have to refer the actual books and things. And okay, one thing which I also wanted to mention, not maybe not captured here, is around all this, and in spite of all this, this was the exact time period when our Pallavas, Pandyas, Chalukyas, Cheras expanded, Cholas expanded the culture into the this Indochina, the modern Indochina belt, and the Far East, Southeast Asia, and Far East Asia, in the islands of Java, Borneo, Sumatra, modern Malaysia, and Indonesia, where the priests used to accompany the traders to spread only the philosophies and culture, which has been accepted by them and followed by them even today, in spite of as much as Islam, the Islamists, except for very rigid areas, you will still find this culture in the modern Indochina and in the Southeast Asia. So we have been, our strength, definitely we had military strength all along our times, but our true strength lies in our Swabhava and Swadharma. Eternal strength captured into our internal strength. So that's all from today. Now I think there are a lot of views that are coming in. I don't know whether there are questions or some other things. I would now open the window for discussion, and maybe I'll stop share so that.
Right. So thank you, Avijit. Fantastic presentation once more. Yes, so the floor is now open for some discussions and questions.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir. So thank you so much for the knowledge sharing session of today. Very exciting to hear the new things. But one question that remains to me is, in our history, like from many years ago, we continuously hear about the Indian version from Chalukyas, Cholas, and everything. But these things were not brought to us by the Indian government in the past generations. Is there any reason, or is it because of patriotism to only learn about Indian history? Is my question.
No, there was no patriotism in that. It was a very well planned, well executed subversion of history that have been continuously taught over the years. And that's what I told you. You see, that's why I gave you, I mean, I kept the references of Pakistan history. So these stories of Hindu Shahis have been described in Pakistan history. Oh, well, there were some challenges in the conversion of the Persian text, which got lost. But ever since even 1860, the Persians, there were two types of Persian. One is the pre-Islamic version of the Persian, the true Persian language, before it was overwhelmed by the Arabic Persian that we see of today. I mean, today's Persian, or the Persian of the Mughals, or the official Persian language of the Mughal Empire and all that was an Islamic Persian version. Even if you forget that, so even once we derived, we have first a couple of hundred years of this Mughal rule, and then the British era, followed by an absolute an absolute effort to follow what the British said. And if you see, we have been taught from all our sources is all the foreign travelers, from Megasthenes to Al-Biruni, Ibn Battuta, everything what we are given the sources of the foreign travelers, selectively taken out. But we are never recording the inscriptions. We have inscriptions in our own country, which tell the true story of that was happened here. You will hardly see that inscription translations being made and made into the history. Lakshmiji is even actually hotly pursuing this inscriptions, partly, and he will tell you more maybe on this. But this is the true story. It is like if I visit England, just think, I visit England or I visit Europe. Definitely I will see Europe and I will see England maybe I will see more than what a person in India who has never visited those lands have seen. But will my version of history reflect the true history of England, or is it the what their perception of English history, not Indian history? Is the true person, because they live there. That is their culture, their swabhava, their swadharma. I don't belong to them. So I can visit them for 7 days, 2 months, 3 months, 1 year, 2 years, and understand that and write, come back and write my travelogues. That is only a partial view of the elephant, isn't it? So same thing has happened, and unfortunately, appeasement, the 1947 and the so-called appeasement that happened to be in the power, so you give the power to me, has happened and is continuing. And in fact, that is what has come out. I mean, if you see even the NCERT books, it's an absolute nonsense. It's an absolute, there are several nonsense. These are things, our naval capabilities have never been taught in any of the histories. And we had very severe naval capabilities all along, both on the western coast as well on the eastern coast. Not only trade, but also the naval, armed naval capabilities, both the naval merchants as well as the armed naval capabilities. And we are taught the only naval people that we first faced was Vasco da Gama coming to our shores. Before that, there was not a boat that sailed in the sea, kind of thing. So this is not the true story. This is now, I think it is time with we as a group, we as a platform, express ourselves, absolutely express ourselves to the true history that exists for the land, the culture, the bravery, the strength that we have, and that should be shared.
Abhijit, do you consider writing a book on this?
Writing a book, yes, but that has to be like a that has to be more effort, because this is knowledge sharing, and then we will have to go to the real books. We'll have to have the graphics. Definitely would be, I would definitely, this is only one chapter. This is only one chapter. There was a first chapter. This is the second chapter that I covered in 2 weekends, and there are other chapters. So definitely, yes, we can proceed towards writing these things and the history of the resistance. Sitaram Goelji's book exists, and further explanations on that book based on that. Dr. Misra's book, writings exist and books exist. So definitely we can think of that. That would be a nice thing from our side.
I think the idea is to have multiple people write books and monographs. So even if you don't have time to write a very detailed 500 pages history book, at least write a short monograph on one topic at a time and publish it. I think the idea is to recapture the academia by putting, examples of written scholarship. Raising educational awareness is good, but that it should not end at that. It should be followed up by the next step so that we reclaim the academia.
Right.
Absolutely important point. Just also to build upon what Mahesh ji was suggesting and what Abhijit also expounded upon. See, this rewriting, or rather, writing the correct history and correcting the biases in our textbooks. So recently, Government of India is inviting suggestions for this. You may all know. Now, how much serious the government panel is, etc., is not in our hands. But what is in our hands is to do our efforts, our swabhava, our sadharma. So Abhijit has a nice plan that we, as a group, as an academy, can suggest that these are the couple of things with references, etc., that this is wrong. We would want you to correct it. And for that, I would actually take this opportunity to invite all of you. If needed, I can share a Google spreadsheet, a Google shared document where all of you please note down the things that are wrong. And if so many of us send this email saying we are under this Voice of India Academy, and now the world will know that we are doing this. We have been doing this for a couple of weekends. That should carry much more weight than individually sending an email saying, oh, that line is wrong. So I seriously want that to be taken up.
The last date for that has been extended to July 15th, to give the suggestions to Government of India. But that should not be end in itself. You know,
Of course.
yes, government makes textbooks, but there's a different narrative. So independent scholarship should be encouraged. And even if it's a small monograph, it has its value. Once you are in the published domain, there will be people who will cite you, quote you, all that sort of thing.
So, Aditji, I think now this gives me another idea. So, our first published book from VOI Academy can be just highlighting the errors in our history books. So, we should be quoting NCERT class 7 book, this chapter, this page. This is wrong. This is the correct history, and here is the complete detail of it, the actual sources, etc. That book can be submitted to the. Of course, I mean we don't have much time, 15 July. But we can submit the preliminary version to Government of India and can come up with this the book. So the book can be just distortions in our school text. We can just do that.
Adilji, see the whole end objective of this effort is to bring out scholars who can come up with monographs and opinion pieces, just as you mentioned, and also provide them with a space so that they can publish and keep everything together at one place, so that future scholars can use that as source material and further their research. That's the end goal of this effort, and I agree with both Arnab and Abhijit on this.
So we should not reinvent the wheel. For example, Brainwashed Republic by Neeraj Atriji already does the work of going through the whole NCERT stuff and pointing out what went wrong. I mean, what was intentionally put as wrong. We can, as suggested, we can initially use digital platform to put all these things and then convert them into paperwork. Because I remember Coinrod LG that time saying that like you walk into Daryaganj, you will find someone who is ready to print your stuff. But then he was mentioning like,
yeah.
You remember, Ji? He was saying that today.
I remember very well, and he said.
But he said that who will read that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Somebody will write.
Who will read that?
But who will read?
I think don't be surprised. People do read when it's a question of academic effort. People do cite, very rare manuscripts or very rarely cited articles. So let's not get discouraged even before doing it. Ours is to continue to persevere, because otherwise we will not be able to change the narrative.
But this date of 15 July, though it itself is an extension, is still too soon. I mean, today is already the end of the night of the 3rd, and we have got 12 days. So, of course, we have to go beyond 15 July, and Vamsi Krishna ji has rightly said some work has already been done. So, we'll have to put together our effort now to bring up something more coherent. And in that sense, we already have this current series going on under the Northwest Frontier Province. That is a part of Indian history, and that should be included. Because what happens is, it shouldn't be that because it is now at least currently lost to India, it shouldn't be considered Indian history at all. That is also another thing, because none of these regions are now part of India. So we have to convince the government with the right words that is part of our civilizational history. And that is because of the civilizational history that we did the CAA bill. Correct. Because those people are otherwise gone into another country. If we treat them as another country's problem and not our common civilization's problem, then that was a very short-term view, and that is wrong. So,
absolutely.
So we have to tell them.
Yes, that's a great suggestion, Aditya ji. That's a great suggestion, because the current cartographic maps will not be there in 50 years' time.
Correct. Exactly.
So it is the civilizational India we are talking about.
Exactly.
Not in
Dharma.
partitioned India.
Exactly. Correct. Exactly. If you see, that's why I said today, why I mentioned that first geographical map was the Helmand River, or that river was actually the original border. Now, the Herat, all this name, the Harius and Harius was the Greek name from where it came to Hari, not Hari. but Harry came from Harius River because of the Indo-Scythian tribes that settled there. But that is what we have to consider. See, the point is, even that's what in the Chitral district of Pakistan, the Kalasha people, they follow the earliest form of Hinduism even today, and they're surviving just because they are a ferociously independent people. They are ferocious fighters.
One update, sir. One update. The Kalash people are now reduced to just 4,000, and
Correct.
they are so rapidly getting Islamized because the primary reason is they have traditionally given a lot of freedom to their women, and women have a considerable control over how family expenses run and society is administered. The women are asked to sit away when they have a menstrual period in another cottage outside the main village. All the women who are menstruating come and live there. But other than that part, the rest of the time, women control it. So what happens is women choose Muslim men as husbands. And
They're
due
forced
to
to.
this thing, it's not even forced to, it's their choice by love jihad. It's actually happening. They get attracted to Muslim men, and that is how the children become Muslim. And the Kalash are now, in the past 10 years, they're rapidly losing out.
Losing.
What
Yes,
they had not lost out.
Yes, and I mean, and there, and if you see, it's not just love jihad. If you see the atrocities on minorities of Pakistan, the biggest district, the biggest sufferings is not the Sikh population, not the Hindu population of Balochistan or the Balochis, but the Chitral district people. This Chitral district is actually this Kalasha, for the Kalasha people. And that is exactly what happened in 1895-96. Till then, they were completely in the Nuristan or the Kafiristan, the district other side. That has become a province
in
because
Afghanistan.
Afghan, because that was also a district, basically a district which became a province because Afghanistan has, every district has now become a province, province, and 39 provinces they have in that small area. But basically a district, Nuristan. And the Nuris, I mean, basically they are all branches of the Nuri population, the Nuris. And they're coming. That is exactly why we can preserve. And why is that today the original Parsi religion preserved? They would have been zero by now. They would have been ideally zero by now. Had they not had that, initially they did not come to India. They moved to Arab. And when they were persecuted in Arabs, it is only then that they migrated to India. And that is how they could they could preserve their early culture. But if you see, the Jews who migrated to Europe could not preserve their culture. There are only a handful, just a negotiation after Second World War, and which they were betrayed even after the First World War. They gave the radar to the British to capture the German planes, and still they didn't get their promised land. The only when this one, and even then the British Palestinian mandate did not give them the Jerusalem itself, the Holy Temple itself. So no other country has preserved the ancient culture as what India has done. No other country in the world.
Unfortunately, India is also the country which has preserved all the versions of Islamic jurisprudence, which are not all practiced in any one single Islamic country.
Correct.
And we have also forgotten that there is a significant part of Vedic India which was beyond the Himalayas, Daradastan, which extended from these regions of today's North Afghanistan right up to Western Nepal. And they are fragmented, and Western Nepal Daradas are now targeted by Maoist Chinese props as Aryans who have come and tried to Aryanize Mongoloid Nepal. This is the version which is going around. There's a lot of anti-Brahmin hatred now against the Khas Brahmins of Western Nepal. So if they would not have been Samrat Lalitaditya, Srinagar, that part of Kashmir Valley long before any prospect of Islamization would have become Tibet. And that did not happen due to Samrat Lalitaditya. And those, of course, Kashmir is very much under the Himalayas, but what is north of the Himalayas is Ladakh. And that part, when you were mentioning how the conversion of the Western Kalash to Afghans' Islamic religion was as recent as what time you mentioned, that is around the same time that Ladakh's Dardas were forcibly converted to Buddhism.
Correct.
Yes, so we have to incorporate these bits and pieces, because Daradastan was part of Vedic Bharat, and we have India beyond the Himalayas, and that too has to be put in. And some of these areas still happen to be under the Indian Republic and even administered by the Indian part of J&K.
So coming back, just sorry to interrupt this discussion, but I think we are in a very nice crossroad, the time-wise. So just to move forward on that idea of the discussions. So
NCERT textbooks.
yeah. So let me, if you allow me, let me share my screen. So, yeah. So if you can all see, I have opened up this. There's a lot of echo coming from. So I have opened up this shared. Hello. So I have opened up this shared Google Doc. So I mean, if you all agree, I think we should start working on this. So of course, I will require your individual Gmail IDs to give you edit permission. But from this VOI Academy, I want this or something. I mean, the template. Please suggest on the template. So if we can have this 5-point agenda for each such distortion, please. I mean, do you think that is good enough? So first is, of course, the book, chapter, and the page. The exactly what is wrong. Okay. So the source, exact actual text that is wrong, and the suggestions. So whether we want to add to something to it, or delete it, or edit it, and the corresponding suggested correct text, and the sources. So that number 5 can be as big as anything, but 1, 2, 3, 4 are very crisp, right? So
yes,
good suggestion, sir.
Yes. Actually, what I am just, I don't know if you can see my screen. I'm just
no. Let me stop sharing. Yeah, you can share your screen. Yes.
No. I don't want to share my screen. I don't know whether it will be visible or not.
No,
it may not be visible. Let me try to check the background. I don't know how to.
No. You
maybe okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not.
Just hold it in front of your thing and at a
Is it
probably
possible?
the right distance. No, it's too close. I think it's too close.
I think it's my background settings that has got to do. Let me just try. Let me just give me a second. Let me see if I can change. I don't know. Maybe not in this meeting. In this meeting by itself, I may not be able to change. Okay. What I was showing was I have the NCERT class 6 history book in my hand, which I just got from my daughter. First of all, they're first talking about the physical map of the subcontinent, and they have not shown the ranges and all. And they have just only shown up to Pakistan, and that too they have not even just only the Kabul River. But we will have to extend this definitely up to Helmand River. That is which was. The Hindu Kush mountains are not even shown. Secondly, I mean, I have seen particularly the maps that I'm showing. I mean, forget about the materials. I mean, the way they have written and all these things and all. So the earliest part of the subcontinent, there, even if you go to this, let me open the Mauryan Empire chapter. What's the stuff, people and all the stuff. So, and the Varnas they have talked about, they have mentioned it in a very wrong way. Varna was actually a division of labor, not a division of society, which has never been mentioned in the textbooks. And even if you see the 16 important Mahajanapadas, by showing the Mahajanapadas, they are showing the modern country. I mean the gallery view, not the gallery view. I am just trying to see the background view. Anyways, I don't have that option. Anyways, they are showing the border of Pakistan. I mean, there is no, and they are showing Gandhara as on the top of Punjab. That is on the Jhilam. No, Gandhara exists even beyond. Gandharva is basically around the Kabul or the Kapisha, Kambuj, Kapisha, and the The Kamboj is to the north. Then it is the Gandharva from the Kabul and Jabal empires, Bamiyan. The three principalities considers the Gandhara. The way they have mentioned Gandhara is just north of Taxila. No, that is not the correct thing. It is way west towards that. This is the Panchal kingdom that they are showed as Gandharva. Panchal kingdom is what the Drupad's kingdom is all about. Drupad is Panchal. That is the Punjab, unified Punjab. And then we go further west and northwest and west is when we get the Gandharva kingdom of what we have mentioned about the Shakunis and all. They form the boundary of the Balka kingdom. The Balka that we are talking, that we hear, the Balkas. Second, this is the Mahajanapadas. Then, and they have to take out the map of Pakistan, or they have to clearly mention this is the modern geographical map, correlating or co-mapping or just imposed on the ancient map. They have to show that currently. So there is no Pakistan in 16 Mahajanapadas. It gives a complete wrong impression among our students that there was a Pakistan with 16 Mahajanapadas. In another 50-100 years, that's what they will know. That's what they will know. Because today itself, they try to claim that we got everything from the Mughals. Within 50 years, we will be told that we got our country from the Pakistan, carved our country out of Pakistan. And the Ashoka, that was the Maurya empire, and the story of Buddha.
So Vijit, I think I also have looked at this NCERT textbooks. So unfortunately, many of our children go through this, and it's a cringe to look at them, even a cringe to look at them.
Correct.
But yeah. So that is what I think. I mean, looking at the time also today, it is almost 9 o'clock. Should we come to a conclusion, resolution that we will? How many of us are willing to work on this?
Correct.
So whatever you are saying can be documented there. Yeah. Sorry, please.
Sure, definitely. I can send you the points. I also would request Vamshiji, if you can share the link of the blog or the writings where it has been captured, the gaps in our NCERT history books.
No, that's a very famous book, Brainwashed Republic by Neeraj Atriji. It's widely available. Brainwashed Republic by Neeraj Atriji.
Okay.
He continuously.
Who are the publishers?
Publisher, I'm not sure. It's a well-known publisher, but Neeraj Atriji is a well-known figure in all these talks.
Yes, he's famous.
Yeah, Brainwashed Republic is what he consolidated all these findings. So whatever is the tabular form that Arnabji was mentioning, the last section or the last pages of the Brainwashed Republic contains actually the tabular form depicting all the points that he is talking about. Like what is the distortion and the page number, the chapter, everything.
Okay.
Correct. But
yeah,
I
see.
When was this last? I mean, what is the last version of
edition?
Yeah, last edition.
I ordered it 2 years back. After that, I don't know. Unless and until NCERT books are not rewritten, maybe they always they have the standard template and they to do print it.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon.
NCERT, it's available in Amazon. And the NCERT book, if I'm not wrong, was only reprinted but not revised. Reprinted since first edition was 2006, and after that there were only reprints from 2006 to August 2019. So
no, nowadays the most reliable source for NCERT is actually not even physical books. We go to their site and we see the updated PDFs.
So right. The NCERT books are all available through there is an app called Diksha. Diksha app, all the chapters, all of these things are available freely. In fact, that's what the schools were recommending during lockdown. Anyway, but Vamsiji,
Arnabji, one last point, Arnabji. So NCERT, we always look at NCERT. But the fact to understand is there is sizable amount of student population that comes from that section which studies state syllabus books. So we can target as state wise That time we cannot see. For example, if I talk about now present day Telangana and Andhra, at one point of time it is completely under Krishnadevaraya kings or something. So that we can target those areas and bring out the history uh, and add it to your same section that you are Google Doc that you are mentioning. So individually we can take state syllabus books also.
Yes,
that's a good point, because having studied in the Andhra state syllabus, our history books were not as distorted as they were in Delhi and North India. We still read about Kakatiyas, we still read about Chalukyas and all that. Yeah.
So Lakshmi Prasad ji, it's very interesting that you mentioned this. See, in our times, the West Bengal history books, they have been, I mean, you will be surprised to say that the government after the leftists have distorted the history books more than the leftists. So
yes, yes,
say, right?
yes. I mean, the advantage of the leftists were they were so lazy that they did not take an effort to update.
I will disagree, but that's a separate thing. I will disagree on that point on the actual reasons. But
what they did, what they actually did was they only revised the literature books and pumped them with their traditional poems that suited their philosophy. Other than that, it was more like, okay, I don't that anyway something will be done. So that was an advantage of the leftists. They were so nuts that they were okay, fine, let it. They only distorted our literature. Other than that, okay, let go. With the literature itself, I will brainwash my students.
Wasn't it UPA who appointed Teesta Settleward as a resource person for writing history books?
Yes.
Teesta Settleward, no? I don't know what are her credentials, but she has rewritten history in Maharashtra at least. Textbooks.
I met her. I met her once in a flight.
We have the culture, right? So we have the culture of having the judge and the whatever
jury and the executioner.
It's the same thing. So Nehru gifted himself Bharat Ratna. He was the head of that committee. So we have this history. So don't worry about this. So anyway, just to conclude today, I mean, I think that one success is that the sessions are so interesting that we don't want to conclude, but given the time we have to. So I am assuming, or I am hoping rather, that all of you are in the WhatsApp group of the Voice of India Academy or the Telegram group. Is there anybody who is not there? Aditya ji, you are not there. I see. Oh, please join.
I can add him right away.
Yeah. Please join, and then we can have this discussion about this distortion of this thing from there. So I need to get this what the book Vamsiji suggested. I saw this book, but I don't have a copy in it. But I think I should get it right away, and then we can start with the whatever is beyond NCERT. There are books that are beyond NCERT. For example, there are other schools that have their own versions of history books. So we can target each one of them. These are still pan-India history books, and of course the state-controlled history books. So we should definitely do that.
There is one more point. Today I just read the 72nd Sarga of Ayodhya Kanda in Ramayana, where Bharata goes to his uncle when Rama was sent to the Dandakaranya, and Vasishtha, after the death of Dasharatha, he sends 5 so-called Duta to bring back Bharata. It is very clearly explained the journey that these people take to reach Bharata's Kaikeya Empire. Kaikeya Empire to bring him back, tell him not to tell him what has happened, but ask him that you come back quickly, and also the return journey of Bharata, which explains the same path and much more elaborate. Just my thought, like not much of geographical changes would have happened unless and until the tectonic plates move and all those other things. But we can trace back the rivers, the names and other things, just that how the names got changed, what is the significance of that. So because itihasas cannot be just discounted like what British people have done to just write our history. Even after Ramayana and Mahabharata, which talk about the geographical areas, and elaborately Valmiki writes everything, like what was found there, which village he stays, what was those things. So that timeline that Aditya ji was earlier telling that we have to draw into the past. We should start somewhere, some known area with a geographical description, and then trace it to the recent thing. It's a very Herculean task, but then this will give a bigger perspective. And I strongly believe nobody would have done this task of keeping a timeline along with geographical proofs and other things.
No, there are works. I mean, if you look at Nilesh Oak's YouTube videos and books, he has tried to do. There are other people also for this, but that is also a very nice. In fact, there is this book on history of India's geography. But there are efforts.
Sanyal, no?
Yeah.
Sanjay Sanyal.
Yeah.
Sanjay.
No, by Sanjeev Sanyal.
Sanjeev Sanyal.
Sanjeev Sanyal.
Sanjeev Sanyal. And yeah. But okay, all right. Yeah. But we should do this. I agree with Vamsi ji that we should take this up more seriously. And
yes, Raj Vedam too. Yeah.
Yeah, Raj Vedam.
Great presentation, Abhijit. Thanks a lot.
Right. So next week, Lakshmi Prasad ji, you are for the third.
Yeah, I'll pick up the next one. Yeah.
All right. So maybe we can then end here today. But
yeah.
Maybe
Just a quick question. What would be the title of the next topic? The next Saturday we're going to discuss. Like,
I'll announce it in the group.
Okay, sure.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, the third chapter.
Chapter, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, the third chapter is the frustration of the Ghaznavis. That's the title.
Okay.
So it's about the Ghaznavis, the Mahmud Ghaznavi and all of this, and how they were frustrated. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
We may conclude.
Thanks
And
a
we
lot.
will
Thanks.
see you
That was a great
Thank you, everyone.
presentation.
Thank you.
And great
Yes.
discussion as well.
Right.
Yeah.
See you all next Saturday.
Next
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Stay
Okay,
safe.
ji.
Bye.
Namaste.